Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our annual celebration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Before I begin, I'd like to remind everyone that the International Sign Language interpretation and closed caption services are available at the bottom of your screen. I hope you can see that. My name is Junaid Ahmed, and I am the World Bank Country Director for India. I'll be moderating today's event. I'm a Bangladeshi of South Asian descent, light brown skin. I used to have a beautiful crop of hair at one point, but working at the World Bank, I now am bald as bald can be. I wear glasses, and I'm wearing a ethnic suit. It's called the Nehru jacket in India. It's called the Mujib coat in Bangladesh. I hope you can visualize those jackets. They mean a lot for our region. Ladies and gentlemen, as climate change, COVID 19, and conflict continue to escalate globally, building cohesive and resilient communities is more important than before. Therefore, it is vital for us to reimagine what inclusive and sustainable recovery would look like for population across the world. Inclusive services for all is the objective. But regrettably, persons with disabilities are often left out of conversations around these critical issues, even though they're among the most of the affected groups that we face in development. Without a disability inclusive approach to recovery, persons with disabilities are at increased risk of being further left behind and falling into poverty due to overlapping crises. Over the next hour, we're bringing together policymakers, practitioners, and disability champions to honor the resilience of persons with disabilities and raise awareness of the challenges they face. We will also, and this is very important, we will also be treated to a musical performance by an exciting artist known as Wawa, Warren Snipe. So please stay till the end and you'll hear wonderful music. I also welcome you to follow the conversation online by using the hashtag IDPD2021 and Road to Inclusion. That's Road, the number 2, Inclusion. It is now my pleasure to welcome to the conversation Murray Pangestu, our Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnerships at the World Bank. Again, before I turn it over to Murray, I'd like to remind you all that closed captioning and international sign language are available at the bottom of your screen. Mari, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mari Pangestu, Managing Director for Development Policy and Partnerships at the World Bank. I am from Indonesia. I have dark brown hair and dark brown eyes, and today I'm wearing a dark blue suit with a matching necklace. This week, we join millions of people around the globe to celebrate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. It's a day to reflect on global diversity, to learn from the lived experiences of persons with disabilities, and to chart future actions to promote inclusive, accessible societies. The global theme this year is Leadership and Participation of Persons with Disabilities towards an inclusive, accessible, and sustainable post-COVID-19 world. This gives us an opportunity to renew our focus on the people who have been hit hardest by the ongoing pandemic. Including persons with disabilities and expanding equitable opportunities are at the core of the World Bank's goals to end extreme poverty and promote shared prosperity. Persons with disabilities still struggle to access adequate health, education, transportation, and other basic services. As we continue to work towards an inclusive recovery from COVID-19, we need to design solutions that consider everybody. It's part of our approach to achieve green, resilient, and inclusive development as we move forward. When something is built or designed with accessibility in mind, it has powerful impacts on communities, not only for persons with disabilities, but many other groups, including persons with temporary impairments, the elderly, pregnant women, and children. Designing accessible infrastructure, education programs, and health systems could change the entire trajectory in the life of a person with a disability. Addressing systemic inequalities and improving accessibility for all are not easy things to do, but we are committed to staying the course. We have been active in supporting persons with disabilities for close to 2 decades, significantly ramping up our efforts in the last 5 years. The World Bank's Fund for the Poorest Countries, also known as IDA, recognizes disability inclusion as a theme that crosses a number of sectors. IDA has enabled us to improve our disability inclusion work through stronger engagement with persons with disabilities for our projects. Their voice and participation in the design and delivery of development projects is crucial. Let me highlight a few examples. In Rwanda, we supported the government with the design of disability-inclusive infrastructure in schools. This resulted in the expansion of over 20,000 classrooms and nearly 31,000 toilets, including new ramps that provide easier access to classrooms, spacious restrooms that accommodate wheelchairs, and accessible blackboards for students and teachers with disabilities. The project will also provide teacher training to support children with disabilities and accessible learning materials. In Nigeria, the Digital Identification for Development project ensured that persons with disabilities were involved in the extensive consultation process, including 2 meetings that explored the challenges of persons with disabilities what they face in applying for and receiving unique identification. The feedback from these consultations provides significant insight into the project design. Let me close by reiterating that, as this year's theme suggests, working towards an accessible future is everyone's responsibility. At the time, we must center the voices of persons with disabilities in our response and recovery efforts. I'm delighted that we have an excellent panel today to share perspectives from the government, private sector, civil society, including organizations of persons with disabilities, foundations, and other partner organizations. I look forward to hearing from all of them today.
Thank you, Mari, for clearly emphasizing the commitment of the World Bank in addressing the challenge of disability as part of our development agenda. So once again, thank you very much. Next, we turn to our panel of 4 distinguished guests who are joining us from across the globe to talk about approaches to designing accessibility for an inclusive recovery. We have with us Elham Youssoufian, who is the Inclusive Humanitarian Action and Disaster Risk Reduction Advisor at the International Disability Alliance, also known as IDA. We also have Abimbola Akinajo, who's the Managing Director at Lagos Metropolitan Area Transport Authority. We have Ibiemi Ayeni, who's the Initiative Manager at Special Olympics in Nigeria. And finally, Rebecca Cockley, who is the Program Officer working on the U.S. Disability Rights Program at Ford Foundation. Colleagues, you have beautiful names, and I hope that in my South Asian accent, I have not done any disservice to those wonderful names. It's a pleasure to have all of you join us today. So welcome to all of you. Elham, if I may begin with you. This year's commemoration comes on the heels of COP26, and we're still in the middle of COVID-19. Climate change is real and a real threat to humanity, and COVID has had its real impact. In your view, what measures must global leaders take to ensure that response to overlapping crises like climate change and COVID is inclusive of persons with disabilities? Elham?
Thank you very much, Junaid. Hello, everyone, wherever you are listening to me and seeing me. I just want to first say that I am a mid-30s woman. I'm also blind, and I have medium color skin with dark brown eyebrows and eyes and dark brown hair, and wearing a red shirt today. So, global leaders, of course, the list is very long, but if I have to just say one sentence to them, that would be no inclusion, no efficiency. So if they want to be efficient, they need to be inclusive, disability inclusive, and they need to be disability inclusive now. Let me use the example of climate change, which is fresh in everyone's mind because of the Glasgow COP26, which just ended. We see that many of the climate adaptation and climate mitigation policies and programs are being designed without considering impact on persons with disabilities and the role that persons with disabilities can play. For example, unfortunately, due to climate change, heat waves going to be a reality of many people's lives all over the world in the near future. But we see that the adaptation policies that are being designed to address that are not always disability inclusive. For example, they do not design the cooling centers in an accessible way. They do not design the information sharing and the messaging programs in a way that all people with disabilities with different communication means that they use can access that information. Also look at the climate mitigation. So we see that one of the policies that is being considered to mitigate the climate change is to reduce carbon emission. But in many of these policies, they do not consider the impact on persons with disabilities. For example, they raise the gas prices to encourage people to use public transportation, but they do not pay attention to the fact that some people with disabilities cannot use public transportation simply because public transportation is not accessible. Interestingly, we, people with disabilities, have been advocating for climate-friendly transportation policies way before everyone else, because it's decades that we are advocating for accessible public transportation. So we have been climate advocates for many years without even noticing that. So transforming public transportation would be a great way to address climate change and accessibility, disability inclusion at the same time. But without considering that, increasing gas prices to reduce carbon emission would be discriminatory and excluding persons with disabilities from community even more. So that's what we mean when we ask global leaders to consider impact of their policies and programs on persons with disabilities. Look at the COVID situation, and now that we are recovering, COVID-19 proved that emergency setups, emergency response systems and rules in many countries are designed in a very non-inclusive way for persons with disabilities. So now that all governments are more or less introducing recovery packages, this is the best time to sit with persons with disabilities and their representative organization and ask them, what should we do so that for the next emergency, which unfortunately is inevitable sooner or later, we don't face this exclusion and discrimination that we did face in COVID-19. For example, look at the education. Due to COVID-19, we had to transform students to remote education. That meant that many persons with disabilities could not access education and had to drop out because the remote systems were not accessible for them. At the same time, it was an opportunity for some groups of persons with disabilities who could not attend education at school they could use remote education. So now that we are considering education recovery policies and programs, it's a perfect timing to make sure that those who were excluded from education because of COVID-19 restrictions can go back to school, and those who could access to education due to introduction of remote learning systems remain in the education cycle. These are just examples. And the main key that I think all global leaders at country level, local level, regional and global can use is consultation. Yes, it is important to listen to persons with disabilities, and listening to one person with disability is not enough. you should talk to different groups of persons with disabilities, because what I can share as a blind person is different from what a deaf colleague can share. And what I can share from global perspective is different from what someone at local level can share. Yes, it would take extra time because you need to take time to consult with persons with disabilities and their representative organizations, but it's worth it because we are 15% of the population. And yes, you need to provide the information required to understand the policy in accessible formats, in sign language, in braille or audio, in plain language for those with intellectual disabilities. But that's the obligation that all governments have under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So the bottom line is that come to us, talk to us, and ask us, and we will be sharing good ways for real and efficient inclusion. Thank you. Back to you.
Elham, thank you very much for those important messages. There's no doubt that if we are to be successful in our fight against climate change and COVID-19, we have to hear the voices of persons with disabilities. Your message is well heard. Abimbola, if I may turn to you, Elham already mentioned transport. So here in Nigeria, in sub-Saharan Africa, the Lagos Bus Rapid Transit System is a great example of accessible design. It would be really good to get your perspective and hear how you have taken the BRT through a process which is made accessible for persons with disabilities. And importantly, what are some of the lessons that other countries can learn from the Lagos BRT?
So thank you very much for that question. So hello, everybody. I am Abimbola. I'm a Black woman and I have black hair, and my hair is in tiny little twists. So I have hordes of little plaits on my head. I have metal framed glasses on, and I'm wearing a brown and a black top. So let's talk about the Lagos BRT. So the Lagos BRT system is the first sort of, it's a way that Lagos State government has created a regulated bus system for Lagos State. And in preparing that, we have always acknowledged, or we have identified the fact that we need to have an inclusive system. We need to ensure that persons with disabilities can access this public transportation. Now, it's interesting what Elham said, that we should talk to and engage persons with disability. And that's exactly what Lamata did as part of the planning and designing for the BRT system, not just the infrastructure, but also the rolling stock when they come. So this is a bus system, and it was challenging, bearing in mind that we're trying to implement in a developed city already. So there were things, first of all, like Elham said, we needed to engage the persons with disability communities that already had groups within Lagos. And we took their concerns and we made sure that in the design, we implemented a number of those issues. So for instance, we have ramps on our buses for wheeling on and wheeling off of passengers. We have level boarding on our BRT stations. And recently, what we've also done, because we realized that whilst we have level boarding on our BRT systems or bus stations, when the buses are not parking at or stopping at BRT stations, it was difficult for the physically challenged to board them. So the new buses we have now are actually lean-in buses, and which means that when we stop at any other station, the bus can tilt and allow level boarding regardless of where we are. We have ramps. All of the new bus terminals we're building now, and Lagos is in the process of implementing a number of bus terminals in accordance with our strategic master plan. So all the bus terminals we're building now, we have ramps at them for easy access. We have specially designed toilets for the physically challenged within our bus terminals, because that's also some of the things you sort of sometimes overlook. We have on our rolling stock as well, we have designated seats for the physically challenged, so that when you're sitting on the bus, it's written there, you know that you need to give up a seat for a priority passenger, or there's a place to actually wheel your wheelchairs to park it on the bus. Now, one very major thing we've identified, apart from talking and engaging with physically challenged or disabled people, is we need to train our people. No matter what you do, you need to really ensure that those who work at those bus stops, those who work as those on the buses, understand the reason why you are telling them to do certain things. So there is a big role for the state and for the agency to ensure that we carry out regular trainings that will ensure that those who work in those facilities know what to do when they encounter the physically challenged. Know that what we are asking you to do when you see them, how to respond to them, how to work with them. And we see this regularly in the system, where we recognize that when people were not trained, they just didn't know how to react or how to deal with them. So a physically challenged person comes to a bus that does not have a kneeling position, will need the bus driver to come out and pull out a ramp. Now, if he's not trained to understand that that is what he must do to allow the physically challenged to access his bus, he won't know to get down or to go and provide that access. So the one thing Lamata has learned is continuous training of the people who work on the system. It's fantastic to provide all of these things that are reeled off. We have pedestrian bridges that access our bus terminals, but we also need to ensure that all those who work around it are well trained to understand what needs to be done and why they need to do it. And that is part of the things that we have learned, because when we first had all of these systems and we realized that people were probably not responding as well as we wanted them to, we've now started to do a lot of training, advocacy, and letting people know, and also putting it out there that Lamata is in the business of actively engaging and ensuring that we're inclusive in the business of public transportation. So from Lamata's perspective, it is a deliberate action that we must make. We have to be deliberate about this inclusion. We can't just ensure that we do certain things and think it will just work. There is the engagement, and Elham mentioned that to start. We need to continuously engage those organizations and ensure that their needs are met and their needs are being constantly fed into the system. But we also need to ensure that our people are well trained to know the reasons why they're doing what they're doing and how to do what they need to do to ensure that everybody is included. And we also have complaint lines, and I get that regularly from those who have encountered poor service at any of our bus services. And we know to follow up that complaint and to find out where it happened. And we know what we now need to do. So we reach out to the complainer and we understand what their challenge was. And then we go back to identify how to deal with it, whether it is to go back to that bus terminal and ensure that we up our training and speak to them. So it's a constant and continuous process of engagement. And I think that is the key thing, engagement. Provide all the physical infrastructure to support inclusion, but continue to talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What a fascinating story. You talk about the use of technology, infrastructure in a different way. You talk about training, but most importantly, you talk about the need for constant voice, listening to those who face disabilities to make transport accessible for all. What an extraordinary story from Lagos. Let's continue our focus in Nigeria, and I would like to invite Ibiemi to share her thoughts. The Identity for Inclusion, or ID4I solution, has been a game changer for athletes with disabilities. Can you tell us more about this and why it was so vital to have this provision?
Sure. Good day, everybody. My name is Ibiemi Ayeni, and I am a chocolate brown Black woman with dark brown eyes. I have brown hair, and it's in an afro, and I have it pulled back. I'm also wearing a brown dress with stripes. Okay, let's talk about ID for I. ID for I means identification for inclusion, and it's a solution being championed by Special Olympics Nigeria to facilitate the registration of people with intellectual disabilities living in Nigeria through the issuance of a national identification number. This is important to us because to attain a sustainable development goal, we need to promote more inclusive communities. To have more inclusive communities, we need to promote the equitable access of every individual in the community to opportunities and services. This will not be possible if an individual is not registered and recognized, one, as a citizen, and two, to be able to access a world of opportunity. The Special Olympics were focused on people, mostly focused on people with intellectual disabilities. We empower them through the power of sports. So our athletes go for training opportunities and competition opportunities. During competition and international competition, they have to travel. To travel, you need a passport. And now in Nigeria, to get an international passport, you need to have a national identification number. And a national identification number is not just to get an international passport. In order for them to access healthcare, when they want to make sure that they are good and they perform optimally during their sporting activities, to access the healthcare, they need a national identification number. Same thing with accessing financial services, to get access to communication services, to get access to education and empowerment opportunities. And a national identification number is essential. And that is why we believe that everybody should have a national identification number. Now, the reason why we reached out to various communities and families of people with intellectual disabilities, and we inquired about the reasons why there's been low records of people with disabilities, especially those with intellectual disabilities, registered in the database, is because a lot of family members don't know the importance of registering their ward or child with a disability, especially those with intellectual disabilities, in the system. And then two, most of them are worried about the distance. They don't have the time to go to these various centers. Another reason is that a lot of them are worried about the treatment that their child or ward might receive when they go outside of these centers. So to tackle these barriers, the ID4I solution has come up with three steps. Number one, we are educating people with intellectual disabilities, people with disabilities and their family members. We're also partnering with the National Identification Management Commission. Without them, we cannot register anybody. So through their partnership, we are able to train their staff on how to treat and tolerate people with differing abilities and to provide the utmost service to these vulnerable groups. And then once that's done, three, both Special Olympics Nigeria team and the National Identification Management team go into the various communities across the various local government areas in Nigeria, and we try to facilitate registration locally in centers close to these vulnerable groups to ensure and promote their registration. We believe we've started off in Lagos, and we have already entered into 25 local government areas, and we are hoping that through the work we're doing, that we'll gain more partners and support to go into other states to facilitate registration for others with disabilities, especially those with intellectual disabilities across Nigeria. Nigeria is heading towards a nation that is being more strategic And we know and we believe that we're heading to a place where the nation would start thinking about strategic social protection for vulnerable groups. And in order for them to be able to do this, they need to know who these vulnerable groups are. And that's why it's very important for every individual to have a national identification number, especially those with disabilities.
Thank you, Ibiambi, for your insightful comments. The Identity for Inclusion, or ID4I, continues to do some path-breaking work, so thank you very much. Finally, we'll wrap up this panel discussion with Rebecca. Rebecca, this is a very important time in our history in the world. We're trying to recover from COVID-19, and recovery has to be one that includes everyone. Perhaps you could share from your experience what inclusive community development looks like, and what lessons do development practitioners can really see on how to ensure that disability does not stop us from ensuring inclusion and development, especially in this context when we are really coming out in a recovery process post-COVID-19. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, my name is Rebecca Coakley. I am a red-headed little person. I have achondroplastic dwarfism. I am wearing a red jacket, black shirt, and I have a lovely 3 generations worth abundance of freckles that I am very proud of. This is such an important question now more than ever because of COVID-19. We know that the epidemic has not just pretty much changed everyone's way of life, but it has also resulted in the creation of over 85 million newly disabled people around the world. This is the largest disability population boom probably almost ever. Inclusive community development means the ability to adapt to this changing population while at the same time centering the needs of the most impacted. As my colleagues were saying, any response to climate change or transportation or poverty will be ineffective if disability is not centered. The opportunity here is really to move from how we've responded to previous crises, responding with fear, responding with isolation, with pity, to responding with empowerment. And so when I think about what this looks like, it means that development should be investing in innovation. It should be investing in best practice. It means including people with disabilities and their communities before there's a crisis, before there's a problem, in terms of both physical access, programmatic access, and linguistic accessibility. From the grant-making perspective, what it means is engaging in participatory grant-making, bringing those that are directly impacted to the table from day one to decide how funding is being spent. At the Ford Foundation, as we built out our U.S. Disability Rights Program strategy this last year, this was a central part of our thinking. So we pulled together a series of disability community consultancies on our strategy, where we talk to experts, talk to family members, and most importantly, talk to people with disabilities, both those that work within the disability rights and justice space and those who work in other organizations, to tell us what works and what doesn't work. Where should we be focusing on? In this time of COVID, how do we balance responding to crises with the day-to-day issues and realities that impact the lives of people with disabilities? This translates into our workplaces as we're talking about the development space. What does it really mean now to go back to work? Accommodations and flexibilities that disabled people have asked for, have begged for years, and we're told we're not reasonable, became provided to everyone almost overnight. That said, when we return to work, it cannot be a time for employers to shift back to inaccessibility. It also cannot be a time that employers say, okay, fine, if you were working from home all of this time, we don't have to make our workplace accessible. You can just stay at home. The new reality cannot be an excuse for segregation, and development has a role in making sure that that's not the case. Development can be investing in healthcare systems that center versus isolating disabled people and the disability communities. Practitioners in these spaces must be more thoughtful in terms of the recovery. So many times in the development world, we believe that our job is sweeping in and telling communities what they need. And instead, we must listen. We must center those impacted. It does no good to rush in with exoskeletons when the people on the ground tell us that what they need is clean drinking water and passable roads. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Very powerful message that the new reality cannot be used as an excuse for segregation. That's a very important message for all of us. Ilham, Abimbola, Ibiemi, Rebecca, it's leaders like you who will ensure that development is indeed inclusive. Thank you very much for joining us in this discussion. I now want to hand over the mic to my colleague, Louise Cord, who is the Global Director of Social Sustainability and Inclusion at the World Bank, for a fireside chat with Jenny Lay-Fleury, who's the Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft. Louise, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Junaid, and good morning and welcome everybody to this segment of today's program, which will be a fireside chat on digital accessibility for an inclusive recovery. Before we go any further, let me just briefly introduce myself. My name is Louise Cord. I am the Global Director for Social Sustainability and Inclusion at the World Bank. I identify as a woman with short brown hair. I am today wearing dangling earrings and I have a pink scarf and a gray sweater. So I've been so impressed so far by the honesty and the meaningful discussions that we've been having on how the World Bank Group and other development actors can make a world more inclusive for people with persons with disabilities. I now have the pleasure of welcoming Jenny Lay-Fleury to this discussion. Jenny is the Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft. Welcome, Jenny, and let's just dive right into the discussion. The first question I'd like to ask is about inclusion and how the World Bank sees challenges of inclusion as critical in this recovery period where COVID has done so much to exacerbate inequalities. The role of digital technology is absolutely key for an inclusive recovery amongst our client countries in the developing world. And I'd like to hear how Microsoft has the efforts that they've made to develop accessible product design and make technology available and ensure an inclusive digital access.
Thank you. Great question. And first, thank you for having me. Jenny Lay-Fleury. I am a white female sitting in a Microsoft office. So I have a whiteboard behind me, brown hair, glasses, and thick red lipstick. It's early in the morning here. And it's a great question. I will say that, like many, we have been learning from this period and learning really as the demographics of disability continue to go up, but the social inequity continues, unfortunately, to go with it. And we're seeing that really the effects of the pandemic disproportionately impact the disabled community. So it's something that's incredibly top of mind for us here at Microsoft. We did just recently redo our strategy to really just be very thoughtful to tackle and attack this bluntly. And with a tagline that actually came from World Bank, which was a study you did in 2016 that coined the phrase disability divide and very aptly described some of the facets and reasons why that has come to the fore. So for us, yes, we're a nerdy technical company. That is the core and the grounding that we stand on. And I think at the bottom line basics is making sure that we embed the disabled community into the core and fabric of what we do, everything that we do. We very much stand just vehemently on the nothing about us without us. And so that does mean that the insights of people with disabilities, whether it's feedback channels, social listening, engaging with specific nonprofits and countries and economic differences, we collect that and garner that. We test our products with disabled communities, we design them with, and that's been able to net us bluntly better products. I mean, that there is, if this isn't just a charity, this is or an optional thing, there is so much business benefit to doing this, but it also does mean that the bar of inclusion and accessibility within our products has systematically gone up over time. So it's very, very top of mind for us, and not just in our products, but in our processes, how we hire talent, how we empower talent, how we unblock issues that could be preventing talent from going from early education into higher education, from higher education into the workforce. So yes, it's got to be thoughtful and systematic.
Could I ask you maybe just to describe in just a few words one of your most favorite dimensions of Microsoft's accessible product design? A specific one, if there's something you'd like to highlight.
Oh, crikey. There are so many. I mean, I feel very lucky to work with as many teams as we do. But I will say one of my favorites, and they're all my favorites to be clear, but one of my favorites right now is the acceleration we're seeing in accessibility in gaming. And gaming and play, I think, is as important as workplace and education. Respite and having the ability to chill out with family, with friends, whether it's on a phone, it's on a PC, or it's on any device, or it's on an Xbox, and methodically opening doors to disabled talent to game. And some of the beautiful projects that I've seen come through this, even with Forza, which is a driving game, embedding British Sign Language, American Sign Language, captioning, and a whole bunch and suite of features into that to open doors to disabled gamers. There's a lot more to do, a lot more. But I think play is just a crucially important component to life in all parts of the world. And I don't think we put enough emphasis into opening doors there.
Interesting dimension that I wouldn't have thought of. Thank you and I can see why you raise it. It is quite important. Thank you. Let me turn now to just a question more on the how. So I understand that to do a lot of these digital accessible product lines, you have a public-private partnership, and maybe explain the how process. And you mentioned your engagement with communities and with different groups. How has this been done?
Well, I think the first thing to recognize when you're building anything and you're aiming to achieve a higher bar of inclusion is that you're not the experts. And while we're very proud to hire, empower, and publicly share, our mission to get more disabled talent into Microsoft, which we've been very aggressively pushing forward on. We just published our new numbers at 7.1%. Of our US population being employees with disabilities, we clearly don't represent the mass. And you can't have one company representative of the globe and the true diversity of disability that exists and how that changes by country, by area, by location. So I think it really is important for us to have the right connections, the right relationships and the right processes to garner that feedback, and to work together to make sure that we ultimately make it easier to be accessible and to understand the business benefits of disability. So I absolutely love working with Charlotte at World Bank. I think her expertise in the industry is legendary. And she's an amazing thought leader, but partnering with her on how we can make it easier is a very important part of what we do, working with other public, private, and nonprofits to, again, methodically get that feedback in. So one of those is Shepherd Center, which has 1,500 people with disabilities, and we test our products with them. And one, we get invaluable feedback. Two, it's the right economic set of processes. Individuals are paid around $50 an hour for their time. So it is also creating a workplace, which is also important, a sustainable workplace. And I think the other aspects that I look at is how can we also partner to get out technology into people's hands.
One of the issues with accessibility is actually there's a wealth of goodness just sitting in the device in front of me that people often don't even know about or have access to. So how can we get more technology into people's hands with the right connectivity to be able to access? And we're trialing some initiatives in the States, but I do hope that they go further ashore, because that's really the benefit that we're going to see from this, to get devices affordable, sustainably affordable, into people's hands in New York and LA, and particularly into disabled communities that may not have had access to those. And that's a partnership between the public institutions in those cities, between connectivity providers and Microsoft as providers of the hardware and software and digital accessibility. And so I think there's a lot more that we can and should be doing. But yes, it's we got to do this stuff together if we're going to really tackle that disability divide.
Wow, sounds really exciting. I would love to hear how this partnership goes with New York and I think you said LA and the technology providers and Microsoft, because to get accessible devices into the hands of persons with disabilities, because I think there'd be a lot of valuable lessons learned for our work in developing country context. So we look forward to continuing the partnership and staying in touch. And thank you so much for sharing your valuable knowledge and insight with us and helping in the collaboration to build a more inclusive post-pandemic world. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time today, and happy International Persons with Disability Day.
Thanks again, Jenny. It was great to have you here with us. And now I'll hand it back to Junaid for the rest of the program.
Thank you, Jenny, for sharing your insights and experiences on the advances that Microsoft has made in accessible technology. There's a lot that we at the World Bank can learn from your experience, and I hope we'll get to continue the conversations in the future. And Louise, thank you for moderating a wonderful session. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to turn to a very special event. We'll be treated to a discussion with and performance by Warren Wawa Snipe, a rapper and performer who recently performed the national anthem at the 2021 Super Bowl. I'd like to hand over the stage to Charlotte, our Global Disability Advisor at the World Bank, for a conversation with Wawa in our office at the World Bank in Washington. Charlotte, over to you.
Hi, my name is Charlotte McLean Inshapo. I'm the Global Disability Advisor at the World Bank Group. I'm a brown woman. I have long brown hair. I have green eyes. Today I'm wearing all black. I have large silver hoops and a silver necklace around my neck. And today I'm joined by Wawa. Wawa, please, will you introduce yourself?
All right. I am Warren Snipe. Everyone calls me Wawa. This is my sign name. I'm a tall black man. Black and gray hair. I have unique locks, pulled back. I have a blazer, and a blue blazer, and a black shirt with an I love you sign on it. I have 2 unique earrings and a nice beard that shows my age.
Great. Well, really glad to have you here, Wawa, and we're so happy that you're here to celebrate with us the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And I was wondering if you could talk to us a bit about, as a deaf person, what does resilience mean to you? Particularly given the fact that we've all come through a pandemic, and really just share with us what that has meant for you.
What resilience means to me, as a deaf black man, is to never give up. Of course, we have limitations being in this world as a disabled person. But what COVID did was complicate those things and exacerbate what already existed. And what we had to do in this pandemic is learn how to adapt, learn how to change, and improve our lives for the better moving forward. For example, Zoom is new to many of us, but now it's a common thing for all of us. We have to figure out ways to add closed captioning to videos, subtitles to videos, things that we just really took for granted or were too slow to acclimate ourselves to. Be much more inclusive, visually, technologically, knowing that we all have disabilities, whether they're visible or invisible. Change was a big thing. You can say that the pandemic had blessed us. It was truly a blessing in disguise. We all had to augment what we believed reality and normalcy was. We just could not give up in the process, and that is what resilience is. We had to work together so that we can live together, be together through these hard times, and persevere to see the other side. Because we would never know what we had never thought of had we not worked together. That we can see the light at the end of this tunnel called COVID. And that way, we had to be resilient to never give up.
Beautiful words, Wawa. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, you had this amazing song called Loud, and it has a very powerful message. Talk to us a bit about what that message is, what it means, and how you came about conceptualizing it.
Well, the message in and of itself, it's honestly taken just from a crazy set of mess. I turned negativity into positivity, a message that we all needed to learn. What I wanted to do was be bold with it, take the next step forward, and invigorate something new. The word loud in and of itself, many people view deaf people as being loud. We clap, we sign loud, we're loud in our voices. But honestly, with my cochlear implant, I find that the world is loud. Right. The cars are honking. The things you take for granted are loud to me. What is the difference? I decided to use loud in an altruistic sense, to be bold, to be brave, to go into uncertainty with the certainty that we are to come out with something creative. And that's what the pandemic did. It provided something that on the onset seemed negative. We as a people came together and found something positive. I came up with something catchy. I never wrote something like this before. But people was just inspired and ran with it. And that's what I think gave worth to the song.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for, developing that beautiful song. So what we're going to do now is ask everybody to stay tuned because we're going to listen to the song right now.
Captain Wawa, Stargate laws, don't care. Pandemic, I'm in losing air. Where's my flare? That's your math, Doc said yeah. Stay back, dance right there. Doc said CP, I don't care. I need that human contact, not VR. May I, my breath is there. My new rent's kind of fried. Make no sense, don't kill my vibe. Oh, I just quoted them all. Dang, that's $1 for the jar. In my world, there's no sound. Papa see, yeah, and it's loud. Stuck in a house, there's no crowd. Bet I'ma get it loud. Sorry, but not sorry, cause I'm not getting loud. This is my world, show them love, we're proud. Haters gonna hate, blow a kiss, make them ground. Shake it, shimmy, drop it, baby, pop it really loud. Yo, we're the Justin's age, pay me in Bitcoin. Zoom if you wanna see me, I'll be in my drawers. It is what it is, but ain't gotta be a dig. I'm an ambivert, I flirt, then I run inside, yeah. I'm a type of jerk. Hop out the backyard, kick a little twist and shout. Neighbors peeking at ya. Come on, y'all, come out. I'm too blessed to be stressed. I ain't one to be messed with. You think I'm possessed? Well, you may be corrected. I'm tired of political drama. Make me wanna vote for my mama. Make money sentence, no comma. Crack a joke, sound of ha ha. Sorry, but not sorry, cause I love it loud. This is my world, show them love, we're proud.
That was amazing. And for someone who comes from a musical family, my wife is a musician, I am absolutely thrilled to have listened to Wawa's sing today. And I'm sure the song will be stuck in all of our heads all day long. Thank you once again for sharing your talent, Wawa, and experience with us. You truly brought to life the celebration that is today. Thank you, Wawa, for inspiring us. We're coming to the end of this celebration, but I'm sure the conversation started here will continue. Let me close by thanking our guests for sharing their remarkable work, insights, and life stories. You have shown what can be achieved when we deliberately include persons with disabilities in the design of our recovery response. As Mari mentioned earlier, today is a day to recognize and value the tremendous contributions and journeys of persons with disabilities and to reflect on future action, promote inclusive and accessible societies. We at the World Bank will continue to step up our efforts to ensure that the persons with disabilities around the world have access to opportunities and support to follow their dreams and contribute fully to their communities and their economies. We also acknowledge the long road ahead to address the gaps in access, participation, and opportunities that persons with disabilities continue to systematically encounter, unfortunately. I look forward to continuing our work together to promote inclusion and expand equitable opportunities for persons with disabilities and ensure that the future is indeed accessible. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us today. I hope that we keep these important conversations going. Thank you very much.